Johnny Appleseed, Psychology of a Legend, American as Apple Pie, written, directed, and produced by Reverend Dr. Dikki Jo Mullen. In this video, Dr. Mullen divides the myths around Johnny Appleseed and his great contribution to agriculture in the United States. He greatly influenced the early development of horticulture. He would purchase land and have others tend the trees. The first orchard that he developed was in Ohio. Johnny Appleseed, Psychology of a Legend, American as Apple Pie, written, directed, and produced by Reverend Dr. Dikki Jo Mullen. In this video, Dr. Mullen explores astrological chart of Johnny Appleseed and distinguishes between the many myths of him through his lifetime and his actual work that he had done, producing many orchards across the country during his lifetime. One of the trees recently died many years after his death. Now we will hear Dr. Mullen talk about the astrological chart and life of Johnny Appleseed.
Hello, I'm astrologer and paranormal investigator Dikki Jo Mullen here in downtown Orlando, Florida, coming to you with a special study of astrology, American as Apple Pie. Astrology is wonderful because it's so versatile. We can use it to look at the horoscopes of countries, celebrities, the weather, and more. But a particularly interesting astrological study involves the legend of Johnny Appleseed, who was a real personality. Heaven, wrote Emily Dickinson, is an apple that's just out of reach. Goddesses are fabled to have contended for it. Dragons were set to watch it, and heroes were employed to pluck it, it meaning the apple. Henry David Thoreau also shared a thought about apples. Surely, he declared, the apple is the noblest of fruits. Jonathan Chapman, better known as Johnny Appleseed, was a third famous American from New England, like the other two, who appreciated this popular fruit and its deeper symbolism. The name Johnny Appleseed, what does it bring to mind? Probably a barefoot, cheerful, scruffy figure with long hair, dressed in tattered clothing, wearing a kettle on his head for a hat, and tossing handfuls of seeds from his burlap sack. Lore about him is linked to the earliest days of colonial America. The first references to American as apple pie date from that era, just before the Civil War, but the phrase really caught on following World War I. Mr. Chapman was a very real and very influential pioneer nurseryman who influenced the early days of horticulture in the United States. Surprisingly, it isn't well known that despite his eccentric and nearly deranged image, he was actually very affluent and came from a prominent family. His father, Nathaniel Chapman, was a Minuteman during the Revolutionary War. Jonathan Chapman was born on September 26, 1774, in Leominster, Massachusetts. His exact birthplace is honored with a granite stone marker, and the street has been renamed Johnny Appleseed Lane in his honor. The street still exists today, and it's something of a tourist destination. Johnny Appleseed introduced the idea of growing varieties of sweet and delectable apples from seeds as opposed to grafting them. He learned about being an orchardist by starting as an apprentice with a farmer named Crawford. Hard cider brewed from apples was a popular drink in colonial times. It was made from the fermented juice crushed from the fruit of the apples. The mash that was left behind after this process took place was what Johnny collected. He removed it in order to save the apple seeds. By 1792, Johnny had begun his nomadic life. He persuaded his younger brother Nathaniel to travel west from Massachusetts with him. Eventually, his father brought their whole large family west in 1805, and they all met up together in Ohio, which was the far western frontier at that time. Nathaniel elected to stay with the family, but Johnny felt inspired to continue what was to be his lifelong journey of traveling around planting apple trees. By 1800, at the age of 26, he already had his first orchard in Licking River, Ohio. He took a canoe voyage down the Ohio River with two canoes lashed together in order to transport all of his seeds. He established a number of orchards and left them with caretakers whom he visited regularly, but he retained ownership of the land. Johnny sold shares in the trees and returned each year or so to check on his orchards. Johnny continued to travel. Eventually, he became very wealthy. Supposedly, the last apple tree he planted lived until recently on the farm of Richard and Phyllis Algeo in Novia, Ohio. Johnny had the reputation of being very mild-mannered, kind, and generous. He became a nurseryman upon joining the new church. This religious organization was inspired by the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg. The new church's theology centered upon an esoteric understanding of the spiritual essence of the Christian faith. The gist of it is that the Holy Spirit encourages living an ethical life. Johnny was a religious zealot as well as a shrewd businessman. His extraordinary geographical connections spanned Indiana, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Massachusetts. This might not sound like a lot of territory now, but it does if you're traveling completely on foot or maybe by canoe across rivers. By all accounts, Johnny was very well known and admired in his own time. The abolitionist author Lydia Maria Child mythologized Johnny in a poem written about the time of the Civil War. The poet and songwriter Vachel Lindsay also published lyrics telling of the adventures and legend of Johnny Appleseed. Author Henry Hole visited all of the counties where Johnny had connections and collected stories from those who had actually met and worked with him. Beloved due to his goodness and generosity, as well as his leadership in expressing advanced insight involving conservation, Johnny Appleseed's legend of a life well lived on the American frontier is still told and retold today. Many historical sites and several museums offer tributes to this gentle and eccentric nurseryman. One of these is the Johnny Appleseed Museum in Urbana, Ohio. There is an intriguing story about him being saved from death in 1819 by what might have been a minor miracle. Johnny was picking apples at his orchard when he fell and caught his neck in a fork among the branches. He was struggling. Seemed he was about to hang, and an 8-year-old boy named John White came by, saw him struggling, and ran to cut down the tree in the nick of time, saving Johnny Appleseed's life. Another time, another story, sitting by his campfire, Johnny saw mosquitoes flying into the flames and being burned alive. He used his mush pot, this doubled as his hat, to pour the water he had on the fire to put it out because he couldn't bear to destroy any of God's creatures in order just to maintain his own comfort. Another time, he found a place to sleep in a snowstorm inside a large hollow log. Then he saw that a mother bear and her cubs were huddled at the other end, where he was about to build a fire. He moved to another place so as not to disturb this family of bears. Johnny lived and slept mostly outdoors. In very cold weather, he would visit his many friends and seek shelter. He would entertain everyone from the little children to the adults with his stories, in return just to have supper and a floor to sleep on for the night. At the age of 70 on March 18th, 1845, it was a very cold night in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Johnny stopped at the house of a friend to spend the night. The legend is that he did not wake up the next morning. He just peacefully slipped into the afterlife. His heaven died on the floor. Johnny never married or kept a permanent home. This strange, kindly, and eloquent man has been called a genius. He left his vast fortune to his sister, Persis Bloom. One author described Persis as not being at all like her brother, a very ordinary woman. She was overly talkative in conversation. That means she never shut up. And she frequently used phrases like says she and says I's. The birth chart of Johnny Chapman is here, also known as Johnny Appleseed, and it offers wonderful insights into his remarkable life. His Sun and Mercury are conjunct in the sign of Libra. This is a very peaceful conjunction. It shows fairness, charm, graciousness, and concern for others. His moon, which represents emotions and personality, is in a very wide conjunction with Uranus, the planet of originality, an interest in exploring new places, and his strong intellectual side, his really extreme insight are revealed with the Gemini placements. They also show his emotional attachment to freedom, variety, and being a wanderer. His Mars is in the fiery, strong sign of Leo. That indicates confidence and a dramatic side, as well as his physical strength and stamina. His life was so very active. Saturn, Neptune, Venus, and the moon node are all clustered in the sign of Virgo. This shows his service to others, also his ability to organize his life and maintain a workable schedule while being a wanderer. The Virgo placements show a focus on health too. In addition to apples, Johnny planted many medicinal herbs that isn't widely known. Later in life, he became a vegetarian for ethical as well as health reasons, which was quite unusual at that time. He has his Jupiter, the good luck and growth planet, in the very earthy sign of Taurus. This shows his success through his earth-oriented occupation as an orchardist and nurseryman and farmer. He had his Pluto in Capricorn, along with Virgo and Taurus placements. This forms a grand trine in the three earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn in his birth chart. This further shows both his remarkable gift for working with plants and trees and his unexpected financial success, just running around tossing out apple seeds, but there was a lot more to it. And so when you have an apple, probably it was from a variety that was originally cultivated by Johnny, because the trees that were here in America were very sour little crabapple trees. And he got seeds from apples that were imported from other parts of the world in colonial times, but then he didn't graft the seedlings onto the crabapple trees, but instead planted the original seeds and grew them from seedlings. Those of you who know a lot about gardening might understand how significant and insightful that really is. I'm Dikki Jo Mullen, astrologer and parapsychologist in Orlando, Florida, hoping that you've enjoyed this star chart adventure into the life of Johnny Appleseed, an American folk hero.
Thank you for watching the video. Reverend Dr. Dikki Jo Mullen has been gifted with several psychic learning styles that she has developed over her lifetime. Each of us has been gifted with innate psychic learning styles as well that we may choose to develop. Reverend Dr. Dikki Jo Mullen is an astrologer, psychic, and parapsychologist. She provides astrology, psychic, rune, and tarot card readings. She provides face-to-face and Zoom readings and seances. She offers webinars, face-to-face individual and group sessions as well. Here are Dr. Mullen's social media sites. Her email recently changed. She offers inspirational insights on her WordPress site. She has more than 200 related videos on her YouTube channel and also maintains a Facebook page. Reverend Dr. Dikki Jo notes that use of the internet enhances the psychic energy of her work. She observes that this is a result of the fusion of her earthbound energy, her psychic energy, and internet energy working together. She encourages you to explore and develop your innate psychic learning styles.